Imagine the situation. Two attractive young people notice one another in a crowded room. They're drawn by a sense of attraction. By a sequence of moves, they find themselves talking about a whole variety of things: social media, TV shows, music, jobs, life goals. The topic really doesn't matter. It's just the way we as human beings try to get to know someone. It's a starting point. We might not be casing the joint exactly, but we are sussing the other person out. In our first reflection, we explored the conviction that we are all created by God to be in relationship. We said that in that sense, we're relationship makers. A Muslim scholar has stated, "I relate, therefore I am," which stands in stark contrast to the common Western axiom coined by René Descartes, "I think, therefore I am." The latter is potentially a decidedly more isolated state of being. This week, in the words of that great song from the musical Oliver, Getting to Know You, we're going to consider an encounter between a rich young man and Jesus and what it can say about relating to God and indeed to others. But before we do, we need to remind ourselves that the encounter between the two young people we started with can work out in a number of ways. It can lead to a growing sense of relationship, perhaps friendship or even more. Or they can go their separate ways, never giving each other another thought. Alternatively, circumstances may mean that they will still cross paths from time to time, perhaps because of their work or a shared social group. In that sense, they will remain acquaintances, politely aware of each other and exchanging conversation occasionally, but there's nothing more to it than that. And so with that in mind, let's turn to that encounter between the rich young man and Jesus, which can be found in Mark chapter 10, verses 17 to 22. As he was setting out on a journey, a man ran up and knelt before him and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. You know the commandments: you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not defraud, honour your father and mother." He said to him, "Teacher, I have kept all these since my youth." Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said, "You lack one thing. Go, sell what you own and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and then come, follow me." When he heard this, he was shocked and went away grieving, for he had many possessions. Here we are confronted with a good man sincerely seeking the will of God. But as with all things in life, sincerity is not enough. There's usually some unspoken agenda that reins in on our sincerest intentions. And it was to the unspoken agenda of the young man that Jesus addressed his answer. He saw in him the one thing that held him back and lovingly invited him to recognize it and to let it go. Perhaps we feel that Jesus asked too much. Couldn't he have enjoyed his wealth and done the will of God? Yes, to a point. That's precisely what he had been doing since his youth. But it seems he felt a tension in his life, sensed that something was missing. Jesus confronted him with the reality that he already suspected. He needed to grow in his relationship with God and in compassionate awareness and relating with the poor and suffering around him. Jesus called him to the path that God calls us all to relinquish his self-reliant, privileged and protected life and embrace a compassionate and merciful living in this life, which is the fulfillment of the two great commands that we heard last week: love God with our whole being and our neighbour as ourselves. Then he had to make a choice. And he did. He turned away, shocked and grieving. Perhaps we too feel tensions in our lives and sense that there must be more to life than what we routinely think, do and have, and yet know all too well the pull of lesser ambitions, the temptation to sacrifice the better for the good. Are we yearning for fullness of life, but labouring with the compromises that undermine it? Do we, like the young man, feel uncomfortable in the presence of this wisdom teacher called Jesus, who lovingly yet unnervingly confronts us with the reality of choice? In that sense, the problem with Jesus and indeed God is that from the very moment we can say we meet him, so to speak, he both inspires our better selves to greater effort and at the same time asks us to own those hidden agendas that seem to frustrate the realization of our better selves. In that sense, encountering Jesus or God can be a bit like meeting someone who is at once attractive but also a bit unnerving. He doesn't seem to waste time with polite small talk. He's no observer of social niceties. He doesn't even seem to worry about what we think of him. He just walks up to us and matter-of-factly points out the nagging suspicions about life that we all labour with from time to time. So where do we go with this relationship? Are we ready to listen and learn? Do we only want Jesus to confirm what we already think and do? Is Jesus or God just another acquaintance in our life? Is our prayer life like a polite social encounter where we only talk about safe things? What are the times and situations that push us to seek him out, to talk with and listen to more deeply? And how would we know? In our prayer exercise this week, I invite you to listen to that story of the rich young man and Jesus again. This time, I'm going to read the passage through more slowly, more prayerfully. As I do, I invite you to listen attentively and carefully, as if you've never heard it before, and to notice what stands out for you, what words or phrases attract your attention. You might want to write them down, but don't worry about understanding the historical nature of the passage or the social realities of Jesus' day. Just let the story do what it was and is intended to do, to provoke a reaction. Listen to what the passage asks of you, how it speaks to you and your life. Notice your emotional responses, your desires and reactions, your justifications or defensiveness, your regret or sadness, your hopes and aspirations. And so, the passage again. As he was setting out on a journey, a man ran up to him and knelt before him and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. You know the commandments. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not defraud. Honour your father and mother." He said to him, "Teacher, I have kept all these since my youth." Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said, "You lack one thing. Go, sell what you own, give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." When he heard this, he was shocked and went away grieving, for he had many possessions. It may have been the words of Jesus that first got your attention, but it might have been the words of the young man. It might have been the emotion of the situation that made itself felt, and you found yourself associating with it. It may be that it connected with other associations and memories in your life. Perhaps you've known people who have dared you to be more than you felt yourself capable of being. Perhaps you've lived to prove them right. Perhaps you live with the regret of not having done so yet. In the relationship that is prayer, these can be the steps that draw us into a deeper conversation and relationship with the God who abides in our hearts. This can be the beginning of a growing relationship or the missed opportunity that we let pass us by. Perhaps we will settle for letting God be a presence we only engage in formal settings that do not ask too much of us. The choice is ours. It is always ours. God waits for us with infinite patience and love.